Hi, I'm Karen Angus Cole. I'm a lecturer in education at University of Bath in the UK, and I'm going to answer the question today: how are student teachers equipped for teaching cohorts containing learners with intellectual disabilities? So I'm going to cover sort of 4 points here. So the first one is that whenever we want student teachers to consider inclusion and differentiation, we want them to do this in the most efficient way possible and in a way which is sustainable. So we don't want students to be able to kind of approach inclusive teaching in a way that destroys them. So we want to set up good habits from the start. So we need student teachers to approach their inclusive practices flexibly and adaptively, so that they avoid being overwhelmed. So what I'm trying to say is that there is no way you could provide for every single of 30 to 40 students in your classroom perfectly every single lesson. And so what you can do is you can start to think about patterns rather than labels. So this is an approach that I drew on during my own teacher training and supporting other teachers as well, and student teachers, but also has been reinforced by Abby Osborne and Robert Eaton at the University of Bath. In terms of looking for the patterns the student need, rather than just the labels that they may have been given with their disabilities. And so you can often find that one thing that might help a student with a labeled disability actually would help many students in the classroom, not just those with the label. And so those with labels tend to have exaggerated versions of particular needs, but actually many students in the classroom, many learners will actually have a similar need. So helping students to think about those patterns and work out what they might do to support this particular students. So for example, maybe it would be a really good thing, say you're doing a maths problem, you might actually not just show a slide with the completed math problem on the board, but what you might do is you might handwrite and go through and model the process of thinking and have that written down as well as verbalized, and that would allow more students to be able to access the process that you're going through in order to be able to explain that mathematical problem, how you solved it. Any sort of problem solving actually. So modeling it, speaking out loud, it tends to slow it down. We can just put something on a slide, we're happy with it, we've created those slides. Actually just be mindful and think, how quickly can students gather that, particularly those with intellectual disabilities, but any student actually, how quickly could they process that? And actually, will they get a lot more for you talking through your thought processes and modelling that? So that's just one example of something that could be beneficial to a student with an intellectual disability, but also to many, many students in the classroom as well. And those are the sorts of things, the teaching approaches, we would encourage student teachers to think about. How can you be efficient rather than just thinking about individual students becoming overwhelmed with trying to meet all of those individual needs? What are the commonalities between them that you can draw into your teaching? The second thing that I would suggest to student teachers is where supporting them to become teaching professionals and move into their career as a teacher is to develop relationships with students, to work with the students with special educational needs themselves. Obviously, they could look, the teacher can look at the documented needs, but actually they may feel different for the student depending on the subject class that they're in. And so it's really important that those relationships are developed, that the students feel heard, particularly if students have an assigned teaching assistant. Maybe they then don't think that they will get the opportunity to have a conversation with the teacher because the teacher doesn't necessarily engage as much with the student just because the student already has an adult with them. So I'm really making an effort to engage with the student, to talk to them, to listen to them, and to find out how they feel and how they're experiencing the lessons can be really beneficial. And then this all leads into my third point around really embedding reflection into student teachers' practice. And that will really equip them to reflect on their teaching and to think about, for example, their learners who have intellectual disabilities. How are they experiencing the lesson? And how do you know about that? And what could you do to improve it? And so evidence is needed in that case. And so that could be from your own interpretation of the lesson, but also through those discussions with the learners, with teaching assistants, and with other people So talking to fellow trainee teachers, talking to more experienced teachers, looking at the literature, thinking about the evidence behind the approaches that are used in the classroom. And so all of those reflective cycles that we would encourage student teachers to engage in can help the student teacher, to think about their approaches in the classroom and whether maybe they are beneficial or not for students with intellectual disabilities and for all students. You know, is active learning being embedded? Is assessment for learning being embedded? And is this going to really help all students, but also those with intellectual disabilities? So that network of people to reflect with is also very important, and that idea of any approach in the classroom being evidence informed really equips teachers to provide inclusive practice in their classroom. And so the final point, which kind of links to this, is that there are other experts around. So you don't have to become an expert in everything yourself. As a teacher, a mainstream teacher, who's teaching a wide range of students from different backgrounds with different needs. So there is a special education needs coordinator in a school who can help you. You can always go and talk to them. We'd say to the student teachers that there are teaching assistants, that there's literature, that there's a lot of other sources that can help. And it's not just the student teacher who has to come up with all of the solutions themselves, but it's about collaboration. And all of these approaches just reinforce the teaching standards that the Department for Education set out. So obviously the 5th teaching standard is around adapting teaching and responding to the strengths and needs of all pupils so that it's inclusive, but there's many other teaching standards that these approaches would support, such as wider professional responsibilities, teaching well-structured lessons, with subject and curriculum knowledge as well, how to deliver that in a way that's engaging for all pupils and accessible for those with intellectual disabilities as well. And so those sort of 4 key areas that I've spoken about today are things that we would incorporate into support for teachers and professional development for student teachers, but also all teachers, to help them to support all of their learners. So the first one is being efficient and thinking about that sort of patterns beyond labels model. The second is to work with the students and develop those relationships. The third is to really embed that reflective practice as often as possible. And the fourth is to remember that you don't have to be the expert and to use that network of people around you. Thank you.